Chapter 2, Tuesday, 8th of July. From the Hambleton 5 Parishes newsletter. As temperatures soar, all 5 of our churches will be open for people to pop in and take sanctuary from the heat wave. Please remember to keep the doors shut, as our feathered friends also like to cool off, and they aren't too fussy about the mess they leave behind. From his post at the front of All Saints Church, Pickle, the lanky bald man in the baggy designer suit, frowned down at his tablet. "Cut Neville Hilton in half," he said confidently, and he'd find the word education stamped through him like a black pool rock. Behind him, the Reverend Mayor, Vicar of All Saints, and 4 other churches, gave a well-practiced smile of mirth tinged with sadness. From a gilt easel surrounded by waxy white lilies, an enlarged image of Nev Hilton smirked toothily at the congregation as if acknowledging the speaker's words. The speaker, identified on the glossy order of service as Chris Kane, MBE, CEO of Lodestone Multi-Academy Trust, raised his eyes to scan the assembled mourners. It was then he saw the 3 ladies of a certain age sitting from some 5 rows back. One wore a wordy frown. The second, in a wispy black outfit, was adjusting a black pillbox hat, whilst the third, the one with the gray bob and large glasses, lowered her gaze and bowed her head as if in silent prayer. His eyes flickered uneasily back to the iPad. He was a man for whom education was a passion and is, quite simply, a massive loss to the profession. His voice sounded noticeably less certain. Head bent, Thelma was not praying, but considering what Chris Kane was saying about the deceased. Her thoughts spooled back to probably the last time she'd seen Neville Hilton, that night out on the Busby stoop. Some years ago now, for her head teacher, Faye's retirement party, hence the presence of spouses and partners. Nev Hilton had been sitting at her end of the table with his then-wife Jax, who had been Thelma's classroom assistant at the time. Thelma could picture that same toothy smirk, hear that rather whiny voice droning on. What was it they had been talking about? Something that led him to making rather contentious political point. Completely oblivious to the fact that those people, he wasn't boring, he was annoying. It hadn't been so long after that she remembered that he and Jax had split up. Looking around the Church of All Saints, blessedly cool on yet another scorching July day, Thelma found herself wondering about the late Neville Hilton. Aside from the huddle of men and women in expensive suits, obviously Lodestone education personnel, there didn't actually seem to be that many people, certainly not locals. She contrasted it with the funeral of her friend Laura in that very church the previous Easter. Then the church had been packed, people standing at the sides. Neville Hilton was someone who will be greatly missed, said Chris Kane, MBE, somberly. Will he? Thought Thelma. Yes, thought Pat. Chris Kane had definitely clocked the 3 of them and was definitely shooting uneasy glances in their direction. Was it seeing the 3 of them again after that last awkward encounter? Or was there another reason? She sifted in some discomfort. Despite the cool of the church and the wispiness of the various black layers, her kid would get up as her son Liam teamed it. Pat was feeling uncomfortably warm. The black pillbox hat felt like a hot clamp on her head. She wouldn't have bothered with it had she not been painfully aware her roots needed touching up. All of us at Lodestone Multi-Academy Trust were impressed by Nev's professionalism, said Chris Kane, very definitely not looking at Pat. Professionalism? Like Thelma, Pat found herself remembering Faye's leaving due. What had that silly argument been about? Brexit? Neville had been so irritatingly dogmatic. Pat remembered her husband, Rod's fixed smile, and repeated kicks under the table. and then talking with Nev's wife and the ladies. "Nev just doesn't know when to shut up," Jax Hilton had said in her usual airy tones. Like Thelma, Pat recalled it hadn't been that long before the pair had broken up, or more accurately, Jax had broken up with Nev. Of the many, many breakups Pat had seen over the years, this one had been one of the more amicable ones, a load of cheery assertions from Jax by the photocopier about growing apart, life being the play, not the rehearsal, before smartly removing herself off to a flat in Boroughbridge. From what Pat had learned, though, through the staff room grapevine, there didn't seem to have been anyone else involved, and it was very much one of Jax's defining qualities, tiring of something and moving on, something Pat had seen happen with various diets, multiple gym memberships, and now her marriage. Presumably there had been some tension, some sadness, though it was difficult to imagine anything removing the smug smile from Nev Hilton's face, but notably Jax had never badmouthed him, and now the former Miss Hilton even had the cleaning contract for the man's holiday flat, which presumably meant some ongoing contact with her ex. Pat looked across to where her one-time colleague was sitting 3 rows back, her trademark brassy blonde ponytail sprouting energetically from the top of her head, bouncing slightly as she dabbed at her eyes. 10 days ago, Jax Hilton, she'd never shed her married surname, Pat noted, had rung out of the blue, with the breezy assumption bordering on insistence that Pat would be as sad as she was and would naturally want to pay her respects. The forceful tones had rather reminded Pat of the way Jax would sell raffle tickets at the school summer fair, effortlessly shifting book after book, looking round at the half-empty church. She could only assume Jax's call had been part of an attempt to drum up support for the service. Pat shifted slightly. It really was uncomfortable in this outfit. She couldn't wait to get home, into her shorts and t-shirt, and into the garden. Assuming certain bronzed somebody hadn't picked her favorite sun lounger to top up in that improbable tan. In the short time we worked together, all of us at Lodestone were impressed by the sheer work ethic of the man, Chris Kane, always one for going on, Pat remembered, discreetly readjusting the pillbox hat. We all saw him as something of an educational powerhouse. Educational powerhouse? Again, Pat remembered that evening at the Busby stoop. Bellend had been Rod's pronouncement. The third woman of the trio, gray-haired in the smart but decidedly well-worn black dress, wasn't solely there at the prompting of Jax Hilton. Liz was there because her husband, Derek, sitting next to her now discreetly holding 2 of her fingers in his left hand, had felt it only right that he should be there to represent the Thirsk and Revolsk Rotarians. As branch treasurer, attending the funerals of members seemed to be something that fell into his remit, along with the stewarding of the Thirsk fun run and selling raffle tickets outside of Tesco. And of course it had felt absolutely right that, as his wife Liz should accompany him, especially taking into account her one-time connection with Jax. Like her friends, Liz also noted the empty pews. Derek's sentiments of solidarity and support were obviously not ones widely shared by other Rotarians. She also regarded the smirking image on the easel. A heart attack, Jax had said when she phoned to tell her about the funeral. Gone, just like that. Had it been Liz's imagination, or had there been something else in that airy, bossy tone? Some darker undertone? Maybe some other medical factor had come into play. Instantly she felt her mind flying gloomily off to her meeting later on that week. Always with these meetings she was so apprehensive before and afterwards felt so unremittingly flat. Still, it had to be done. As though reading her gloomy thoughts, she felt Derek's grip on her 2 fingers tighten. Liz sighed and sternly forced her mind back to the service. On the front row she could see the person who Pat had identified as the second Miss Melville Hilton, standing in her glossy, tight-fitting purple-black dress with a ramrod posture. She put Liz in mind of a tightly closed tulip. Hard, her face an expressionless mask of makeup and Botox had left Liz with the odd feeling that one sharp tap would dislodge the whole edifice, like one of those Venetian masks, sending it clattering to the tiled floor. From the tone in his voice and the way the Reverend Mayor was stirring, Liz sensed that, at long last, Chris Kane, MBE, was winding down to a close. Put simply, he said, Nev Hilton was the top guy. As the Reverend Mayor walked to the lectern, Liz found herself pondering the words, a top guy. Like her friend, she remembered the pompous figure holding forth at the Busby stoop. No malice in him, but such a strong sense of his own views. She remembered that immortal phrase of her late father, one used by both her and Derek when talking about Neville Hinton that morning. Nice chap, but nobody likes him. After the service, the sparse congregation milled in the vicinity of the stone porch of All Saints, waiting for the emergence of the coffin, making the start of Neville Hinton's last journey on this earth, the short drive to Maple Park Crematorium. Like the rest of the countryside that summer, the graveyard was bleached and dusty after nearly 4 weeks of blazing sunshine and little rain. The various stilettos and designer trainers of the Lodestone group sparked little puffs of sandy dust, while Derek gravitated to the couple of fellow Rotarians over their arms. Liz, Pat, and Thelma retired to a discreet distance under the shade of one of the gently rustling trees by the honeyed stone wall. So, said Pat bluntly, removing her black hat, roots be damned. What was all that all about? I'm wondering, said Liz, why the funeral was here and not in a church at Hollandby. She made a grab for her bag, and a balsam tissue standing in this graveyard was doing nothing for her hay fever. There is no longer a church at Hollandby, said Thelma. It was deconsecrated a couple of years ago. Pat shook her head impatiently. I don't mean where the funeral was, but who was at it, she said, or rather, who wasn't at it. There was hardly anyone there. Most of the Rotary lot were away on holiday, said Liz. At least that's what they told Derek. There's the group from Lodestone, pointed out Thelma. The three looked over to the huddled group. Chris Kane had his back to them. That's something else, said Pat. Is it me, or is Chris Kane avoiding us? He certainly looked surprised to see us, said Liz, blowing her nose. But he didn't seem willing to talk. Though, of course, he could just be embarrassed about the last time we met. There was a brief pause as they all remembered the scandal involving a certain member of the Lodestone Trust personnel they'd been involved in uncovering. I wonder, said Liz, if there was maybe some issue with Neville at work. Some murky goings-ons? Mused Pat. Neville? He'd only been there 10 minutes, said Thelma, according to Chris Kane. And all those lilies, continued Liz, don't you think they were a bit OTT? There's so many flowers at this time of year, and a lot cheaper. Remember all those daffodils at Laura Barton's funeral? Never would have been on a fair old whack if those Lodestone suits are anything to go by, observed Pat. And apparently the photos at Ainderby Golf Club, no expense spared, according to Jack. The mention of their former colleague, there was a significant exchange of glances. I suppose what I'm wondering, said Thelma, is why we're here. Because Jack's asked us, said Pat. The inverted commas round out the word asked were audible. I don't understand, said Liz, frowning. Jax was very insistent I came. said Thelma. "And me," said Pat. She looked at her friend. "You think maybe she wanted us here for a particular reason?" Thelma nodded. "Thought did cross my mind." Liz remembered that dark undertone in Jax's voice. She had a sudden nasty feeling she might be committing herself to something she'd much rather not. "But what reason?" she said worriedly. She could feel another sneeze coming on. Thelma nodded to where a blonde ponytail could be seen making a purposeful passage through the graves towards them. "I think we might be about to find out," she said. "I'm completely gutted," said Jax emphatically. On her unspoken but unmistakable bidding, they had relocated to a more discreet distance from the other mourners, next to a pile of pungent, crawling grass clippings and the last resting place of Fred Webster. Beyond the yew trees, a combine was making a dusty progress across the baking beige field. "I tell you," she looked at her three ex-colleagues, "I've been in absolute bits since it happened. But it's Chelsea. She's the one I feel sorry for." "Chelsea?" asked Liz politely. "The girl who works for me. She's the one who found him. Terrible she is. Won't go to clean on her own anymore. Me or her mom might have to go with her. Poor love. And with 12 holiday, let's do on a Saturday. It's a complete nightmare." "Must have been very upsetting for her," said Thelma dryly. "It was more than that," said Jax darkly. The three looked at her, wondering what could possibly be more upsetting than coming across a corpse. "It was a heart attack?" asked Pat bluntly. "Oh yeah," Jax nodded vigorously. "Nev had been having all murmurs and stuff, even when we were together. Used to worry me half to death, but you know him. He wouldn't be told." "What was it that upset Chelsea so much?" asked Thelma. "Apart from finding a body on the sofa," said Pat. "Two things." Jax lowered her voice and looked around at the three. "Nev, he weren't one for getting scared or out. He wasn't sensitive, not like me." Here Pat hurriedly converted a snort into a cough, but according to Chelsea, the look on his face, terrible it was. There was a pause when no one, not even Pat, thought it appropriate to point out that a sudden heart attack was unlikely to result in an expression of calm serenity. "And the other thing," prompted Thelma. "Excuse me." The voice that broke in was both abrupt and rather harsh. They looked round to see the advancing black-purple figure of the second Miss Hilton. Fifyon, the ponytail, gave an agitated flick. "I want to introduce you to Thelma, Pat, and Liz. They all used to work with me. They all wanted to pay the respects, like—" Jack spoke in a nervous rush, and all at once the three realized the reason for their discreet relocation. "We're so sorry for your loss," Thelma, earnestly if not strictly truthfully. Fifyon nodded perfunctorily. Was that a glint of antipathy in those hard features? "Does any of you own a white Fiat?" she said. "It's only as blocking in the hearse." Liz's hand flew to her mouth. "I am so sorry," she said, sounding as guilty as if she'd managed to stumble into the grave itself. She stiffened and emitted two sharp, horrified sneezes. "It's okay," said Fifyon grimly. "Only if you could shift it." "I'm going now," said Liz, fumbling for more tissues as she set off rapidly as she could in her black court shoes, followed at a distance by the second Miss Hilton. "So go on," said Pat. "What was the second thing?" "We really can't talk here," Jax frowned after the retreating figure. "You're going to the photo, aren't you?" Both Thelma and Pat instantly emphatically shook their heads. Both began evoking appointments and commitments, but Jack spoke quickly over them. "Don't apologize, it's fine," she said, making both of them feel the need to say sorry. "I'll come across and see you. You do still meet at the garden center on Thursdays. I'll see you all then." "But what was it?" said Pat. "What happened?" Jack shook her head. "Something inside the holiday Let where they found him. She said, something really weird. She looked round uneasily as if expecting the second Miss Hilton to make a reappearance. "In what respect weird?" asked Thelma. The police thought nothing of it, and neither did Fiffion, but she never sets foot in the place. "But I know that Holiday let inside," Thelma prompted. Jax nodded, eyes still roaming around the churchyard. "It's been done outright tasteful. I mean, one thing Nev did have an eye for, color schemes. And the living room, where they had found him, it's been done out in grays, gray sofa, gray walls, all set off by a crimson carpet." "So?" said Pat. "It was one of the walls," said Jax. "When Chelsea went in and found Nev, she noticed someone had gone and painted it." "Like graffiti?" said Pat. "No," Jax shook her head emphatically. "No, they painted a line. Someone had painted a bright yellow line down the back wall.